Good evening and happy Friday. My name is Bree Hall, and I did my leadership analysis on Jane Goodall, the primatologist. For those of you who hear this little bit of info that I'm going to give about Jane and want to learn more, I came across a really great documentary that is on Disney Plus about Jane and her emergence into leadership in the science world by National Geographic called Jane. So I invite you to watch that. I watched it a couple times in writing this paper, and I found it fascinating and made my opinion of Jane even higher than it was previously. So a little bit about Jane. Jane was born in the 1930s and had always dreamed of going to Africa. And she made her way through school, was waitressing after school, and saved up enough money so that she can go for the first time. Her very first trip to Africa was to be a secretary for the scientist Louis Leakey. Now, Louis Leakey saw Jane as a clean slate, really liked her drive, her initiative, her values, and because of that, he invited her to do her own study on chimpanzees. At the time, he wasn't super thrilled about how other anthropologists and scientists who were studying behavior were conducting their studies, and he wasn't happy with the lens that they were looking through. He felt that it was too narrow, and having someone with a clean set of eyes, he thought, could make the breakthroughs that the science world needed at the time. Jane took that and ran with it. A couple months later, she was on a boat with her mother, her companion for her first trip, and a cook and the cook's wife, and she lived in Africa for 3 months without any scientific training. What she found in that first 3 months redefined how we define our human species, how we define man. Prior to her study, we had seen humans as the only living thing that could make tools and use them. We were considered man the tool maker. She found that chimpanzees not only used tools but altered them for their own use, specifically using twigs to get ants out of termite holes. After she submitted that study, a lot of people really didn't believe that a single woman with no scientific background could come up with these findings, could do such an in-depth study. And she ended up going back to school, skipped over bachelor's, skipped over a master's degree, and went straight for a doctorate in the study of behavior. And after that, Jane became a leader in the science field, not only just in Africa, but to this day, the woman is in her 80s. She has never been in any place for longer than 3 weeks. She travels constantly, educating people, specifically children, about conserving the environment and the animals around our planet. So she is still, to this day, doing what she's always wanted to do, and she has found her calling. The leadership theory that I connected most with Jane was definitely the authentic leadership model that we read about. Bill George came up with a certain set of qualities that an authentic leader has. They have a strong purpose, which Jane has demonstrated over and over again through her very specific and very driven studies on chimpanzees, but also in environmental conservation. Authentic leaders have strong values, build strong relationships, have incredible self-discipline, and have a strong heart. They care a lot about the things that they are working towards. And I think Jane exemplified all of these in Bill George's model of authentic leadership. Another resource that Northhouse's leadership book referenced in the chapter about authentic leadership was Luthen's and Aviolo's Authentic Leadership Development. In this study about authentic leadership, a few other words besides the ones I have already listed came up. One of them really resonated with me when learning about Jane, and it was resilience. She battled nature, gender expectations, and archaic scientific ideas, and she triumphed over all of them. Jane never allowed the ideas of others to become an obstacle for her. She really took everything in stride and forced others to adapt to her and her findings because she knew they were true, instead of adapting to others' ideas. There was a quote that she states in her documentary that really stuck with me, and it was that I have always felt that I have been extraordinarily lucky. Although, as my mother Vern always says, luck was only part of the story. She has always believed that success comes through determination and hard work, and that the fault is not in our stars, but in ourselves that we are underlings. I certainly believe that this is true. This quote just shows a lot of the characteristics that I admire about Jane. She's hardworking, determined, and she didn't take anything for granted. She took every opportunity and did her very best to make the most of it. These are all lessons that I want to carry with me on my leadership journey. Another thing that Jane exemplified that I also connect with myself is that Jane always was learning. And that was the top quality in the Clifford Strengths that we did a couple of weeks ago. My top quality was a learner. And I've always known this about myself, that I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to do is read the New York Times. And I like to absorb information and regurgitate it whenever I get the chance. And Jane seemed like that she does the same thing. She could not get enough. Her journals that I've seen photos of are full of beautiful drawings of not only the chimpanzees, but the food sources and the plants and the habitats in which they were living. They're full of charts. Before Excel and spreadsheets, which are some of my favorite things to use, were even in existence, she was creating them in journals in the bush of Africa. And I just think that her story is something that all people should look towards when they're talking about resilience, strength, and using your dreams to become your own reality. And that is what Jane did for me in this research that I had with her. I first chose Jane because I admired her position as a woman in science. After analyzing her life, leadership qualities, and professional explorations, I not only admire her, but I have added her to the list of women that I also aspire to emulate. I mentioned in past assignments how the reading of Authentic Leadership sounded most like the theory I could see translating well into my classroom. Jane supported this idea, and Jane more recently has found her calling in teaching the world and youth about the environment and human race's role in protecting it. I was so happy to find this additional connection in teaching with Jane. I have a feeling that her lessons will continue to guide the world, myself included, for years to come. And I was super thrilled at the end of this assignment to have chosen Jane as the subject of my leadership analysis.